Welcome back to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's guest, but first let's hear from our podcast sponsors. We'd like to thank Violet Defense for their support of the Educational AD Podcast. Violet Defense is dedicated to protecting our world from germs by bringing the power of UV disinfection to everyday spaces. Their patented technology enables them to harness the power of the sun to incorporate ultraviolet light into products and environments like never before. Whether you're ready to implement some of their existing products, or if you'd like to explore researching and developing a custom deployment of their technology for your school, Violet Defense has the solutions and the experience you need. Go to violetdefense.com to check out their great products. We also want to thank Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. You know, they are on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. They have a variety of interactive touchscreen video consoles and an extensive library of templates to make it easier than ever to recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present. For ideas on how to showcase your school's diverse history along with your proudest moments, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com or to learn more and get started with your own digital Wall of Fame tribute. Call them at 614-981-3589 or email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. That's sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank our good friends at Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. You can learn more about what Hometown Ticketing can do for you by going to hometownticketing.com. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. We also want to thank Sideline Interactive for their support of the podcast. You know, it's becoming harder and harder to fund an athletic department these days, but Sideline Interactive's indoor scoring tables and video boards can generate $10,000 or more every year, while also bringing excitement in the gym and the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. We've got a Sideline Interactive indoor scoring table in our gym, and it is tremendous. We use it for home games, but we also use it for pep rallies. We use it for signing ceremonies. It's a tremendously versatile tool. If you want to find out more about these great products, go to sidelineinteractive.com or call them at 832-786-0302 and schedule a live web demo. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com for more information. That's sales@sidelineinteractive.com. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. We also want to thank Huddle. At Huddle, we power sports. More than 180,000 teams, including some of the best in the world, use Huddle to elevate the performance of their athletes with video and analytics. Huddle's the complete performance platform. They have online tools, mobile and desktop apps, smart cameras, analytics, and a whole lot more. Huddle's built for every level of play, from club and youth programs up through high schools and colleges, and even professional teams are using Huddle to raise the level of performance in their teams. You're in pretty good company with over 6 million users, including your student athletes, a lot of their parents, and the coaches of the teams you're trying to get your kids recruited to. You want to find out more about what Huddle can do for you or how your school can become a Huddle school, go to huddle.com and talk to their experts. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. And we want to thank Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment of our podcast. Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic program. Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack also puts you in touch with the 95% of the parents and the athletes who really love your program, and it gives them a voice to help demonstrate the importance that a positive athletic experience has for them. Go to athleticsurveys.com and check out their testimonials, and then give them a call at 1-800-738-6466 or email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. If you've never used a survey to check the pulse of your parents or your student athletes, you're really missing out. Talk to the pros at Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack and let them help you take your athletic department from good to great. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD. We are traveling all the way to Europe today. We're going to meet with Nick DeForest. Nick is a certified master athletic administrator. He's the director of athletics at the American International School of Vienna in Vienna, Austria. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks, Jake. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Happy New Year to you, sir. For our listeners, we're recording this on January 13th. And I should say, and he'll get into it later on, but Nick's also the host of a very popular, very good podcast of his own. So we'll talk about that later on, but let's go and get started. Nick, we always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school, and kind of how your path has led you to this international posting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a Canadian, so I think I'm a double international as the NIAAA goes. But yeah, I grew up beside Niagara Falls, Canada. Was a hockey goalie and catcher in baseball, and was lucky enough to play baseball in college. So I went to a JUCO in Buffalo, and after 2 years there, I was going to go to Niagara and play Division I, a great dream. But I had a coach, an old coach, say, "Hey, do you want to go to Europe for a year?" And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. Better than Western New York, I guess. So I went for 1 year, and that was in 2000. So it's 22 years and counting now over here. And yeah, so when I came, I continued to play baseball, and I coached with the national team. I went back 1 year, finished up my university degree, got my teacher's degree, and then I really tried to make Vienna home and get a proper job, I'd say. So I went to the American school and said, "Hey, can I coach baseball and maybe be a substitute teacher?" And they threw me right in the fire. Started coaching the baseball team and got a long-term sub job, and haven't looked back. I was planning to be a teacher. I really didn't know what an AD was. I think in Canada, we didn't have them at our school, and they're not really, it's not really normal to have an AD. And yeah, I really had no idea, but ultimately I was doing work of an AD kind of my whole life, coaching, organizing teams, was doing that with the national team, trips. I started the first slow pitch league in Austria. And so I was doing all that basically AD work without even really realizing. And then as I got more involved in the school, the AD at the school, Andy Harrison, really took me under his wing, showed me what the job could be. And I loved it. And then I just kept rolling with it from there.
Obviously that decision to go to Vienna was kind of a leap of faith, but talk a little bit about that process. Take us back to those younger days. Do I stay in school, in the States, or do I travel? How'd that all happen?
Yeah, and it really, it was a really tough decision. And it was before really everything was on the internet. You couldn't just find out everything you could. So, the first thing was there's baseball in Europe. I had no idea. And the school, I really didn't know what I wanted to major in. The JUCO, they just made everyone kind of take general studies. So I wasn't really fixed on a major. So I thought, hey, why not travel, see a bit of Europe, and just like you said, that leap of faith. And one thing that got me, because teachers do it all the time. There's teachers going overseas and traveling, and they travel alone often, right? If they don't have a family. So to me, that's really scary. And jump in, and I knew I was jumping in to coach a team. I knew baseball was my link, and I would make friends fast. And because we're all baseball diamond here, baseball diamond there, it was all the same. So it was an easy transition, I think.
Okay, got to be exciting. I actually, back in the day, took high school football teams and coaches over to England during spring break, and we toured and we traveled and we'd play British clubs in American football. So, very cool experiences.
Yeah.
For our listeners, we're visiting with Nick DeForest, Certified Master Athletic Administrator, Director of Athletics at the American International School in Vienna, and the creator of the Globetrottin AD's podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes, but let's take a quick break and hear from one of our podcast sponsors. We want to thank Sideline Interactive for their support of the Educational AD podcast. You know, it's becoming harder and harder to fund an athletic department these days, but Sideline Interactive's indoor scoring tables and video boards can generate $10,000 or more every year, while also creating excitement in the gym and the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. You've heard me say that we have a Sideline Interactive score table in our gym, and it is fantastic. Go to sidelineinteractive.com or call 832-786-0302 to schedule a live web demo. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com for more information. That's sales@sidelineinteractive.com. I promise you, you will be very impressed with their selection. Welcome back to our visit with Nick DeForest, Certified Master Athletic Administrator. Nick, we always like to ask our guests about the mentors that they've had in their life. None of us get to where we're at on our own. And I'm wondering if you could share the expression I always love to use. People get tired of hearing it, I think, is I still hear those voices in my head. So whose voice do you still hear?
Well, I think a mentor for a lot of people are their parents. So I definitely need to start with my parents. They were, well, my two halves, teaching and coaching, I'd say. My mom was a teacher, as her brother was. And so I have it from that side. And my dad was a coach, and he ran the baseball club in our town. So he coached me, as well as hundreds and, well, thousands of other kids for years and years. So I think from those two, I really got to love those two professions, and saw how great it is when you can give back, to other kids in your classroom or kids on the field. And I was always in awe when I'd be out with my dad and people would come up and say, "Oh, hey, Andy." And then I'd hear, "Your dad coached me when I was young, and that was the best year of baseball," and things like that. And I always want to have people do that to me. And it's happened a few times now that I've been coaching long enough. So I always think of him when things like that happen. And then, work professionally, I mentioned Andy Harrison, who's still at school. I have a desk 2 meters away from him. And he was really, and still is, a mentor for me for AD and that world, and how to deal with people, how to pay attention to details and how important details are, and really how to step back and just take this, balcony view, so you're really looking over this whole program. You really have to look at the best interests of the program and keep that in mind, not just, obviously coaches sometimes are focused just on their team, or, basketball is the most important sport and this and that. And, we really strive to treat all programs and all teams and all coaches the same. And that's something he does really well.
Yeah, you definitely have to take on that more global, to not to use a pun, perspective when going from the head coach to the AD. Let's talk a little bit about, your path of certification. We have a lot of younger ADs that listen, and I think it's important for them to understand, how that gets started and that journey towards
Right.
becoming a CMAA. So share your path a little bit about certification.
Yeah, I'd love to. It's what's got me here. The global thing where we've been mentioning it all started from there, and really it was some friends. So I think without them, so Matt Fleming, who I do the podcast with, he started with a couple other friends, and they took courses. They're American, and when they'd go home, they went to some conferences and really knew about the NIAAA. And they brought the idea to Europe, really, and they started developing those first international courses. And they brought instructors over. So I learned about it from them. They kept saying how great it was, and really that it was the only thing out there to get better. So I took some courses. I really appreciated the PD. I wanted to do more. But it wasn't until I went to that first conference, it was Phoenix, I think about 5 years ago now, that I really saw the massive servant leader component to the NIAAA. And I really fell in love with that idea and saw how, all the leaders in the NIAAA really give so much and have for years. And I really took that to heart and saw, okay, I need to do more. I want to get involved more. And that's when I finished my CMAA. I started teaching courses, tried to get on the international committee, which I did. Authored the CI part of the CIAAA exam. And now I'm the 904 course chair, and writing a new 910 with a few other colleagues. So it was a conference that really dug it home to me and really like sparked my interest to really get involved and dig into the organization as a whole.
Yeah, I just heard about the new 910 international course. That's exciting. And I was on certification for a number of years and was able to see a little bit at a distance, the growth of the international program. Very, very cool to see what it's become from those humble beginnings. Very cool. For our listeners, once again, we're visiting with Nick DeForest. He's a CMAA, and he's the Director of Athletics at the American International School in Vienna, Austria. When we come back, we're going to hear about the Globetrottin AD's podcast and how that all came together and how that works. So please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We also want to thank Huddle for their support of the Educational AD Podcast. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. More than 180,000 teams, including some of the best in the world, use Huddle to raise the performance level of their athletes and their teams using video and analytics. Huddle's the complete performance platform. They have online tools, mobile and desktop apps, smart cameras, of course, there's analytics, and a whole lot more. Huddle's built for every level of play. Club and youth programs use Huddle, and high schools and colleges have been using Huddle for years. Even professional programs use Huddle to help their teams and their players do better. You're in pretty good company with over 6 million users, including your student athletes, a lot of their parents, and the coaches of the teams you're trying to get your kids recruited to. If you want to find out more about what Huddle can do for you and your program, or how your school can become a Huddle school, go to huddle.com and talk to their experts. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. Welcome back to our interview with Nick DeForest, Certified Master Athletic Administrator. Nick, as I mentioned, you're one of the founders and the host of the Globetrottin AD's podcast. And right now, there's a bunch of us that are doing podcasts. And I think most of them are pretty darn good. But again, you were near the front end of that. So share with our listeners, how it got started, where'd the idea come from and how you put it together and some of the things that you're doing or you have done as you get ready to start year 3 of the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, kind of like the international courses at the NIAAA, it came out of really liking the content, but wanting something uniquely international. So that was the same way with the podcast. I listened to the off-duty ADs and Beyond the Bench and enjoyed it. But I thought, hey, we should have something unique to our situation so we can talk about, international schools. Because some things are the same, but some things are really different. And it was before Corona. So the conference in I think San Antonio, December of 2019, I started recording international ADs and just kind of getting a bio. And that became our first episode. And our plan was to always record in person. I see Matt Fleming 5-6 times a year, different conferences or events. He's about 2 hours away from me. And we thought, it would just be sitting around talking. And then Corona hit and we all, came down to the basement like I am right now. And then we went online and what the start of it became like, I think we were looked at as connectors in the international school community. So people kept flooding with questions. What are we going to do? We're all at home. Can we do something? And, I had the idea of a conference, an online conference by international school ADs for international school ADs, I guess. And we whipped it together and had 2 days of 11 hours of content in a row and had 1,000 people take part. And from then it's just kind of snowballed. So the podcast, the connections, started doing a live panel show on a site called School Rubric. And we had just a few more conferences, activities, and it's been really fun. I get to talk to great people all over the world and just grow this community, I think, which is really nice, because there's not that many international school ADs out there. There's lots of different schools. They may not all have sports, or they're just spread so far apart that, you may not have anyone, down the street to play against or to talk to. It's, as all ADs know, you can't just go into the faculty lounge and talk to other ADs like teachers can, and talk shop. So it's been a great way for us to talk shop and stay connected, especially through, the last few years of the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, those connections are so important. You hear in the States about, we had to drive, 2 hours to go to a game or something like that. And for international schools, it's the norm. You're traveling hundreds of miles and overnight trips. So that connection is so critical. I had not heard that origin story before. Very similar to ours. In 2020, I was the president-elect for our state association in Florida, and the president-elect's job is to organize the state conference that year. And I was all ready to go. We had our keynotes, we had our workshops, we had our LTIs. And then in February, the decision was made to cancel because of COVID. And a long story short, we did the same thing. We, and this is, as you said, before anybody knew what Zoom was, we did 2 weeks of Zoom workshops. We did 2 a day. So we had 20 workshops. We had presenters from, I think, 14 different states. Like you, we had about 1,000 downloads. We even had a couple of international folks log in. And we weren't, we didn't sell it. We weren't trying to make money. We were just trying to do something to have that. And we didn't even call it this, a virtual conference, but we wanted to do something. And from that, it was pretty successful, which was nice. But I was asked to be on the Hanging with the AD podcast, Josh and Don out of Georgia. And they were just so nice, so professional. I make the joke. I had such a good time that you can either blame them or thank them. That's really what led me to deciding to do a podcast initially to just feature our ADs in Florida. And, got a call from a friend in Nebraska after a couple of weeks. Hey, I've been listening. Can I be a guest? And here we are. I think your episode is going to be something like 245 for it. So it's just been so much fun. I've listened to your podcast. I know you guys enjoy it just as much as I do. So we're going to do this again at the end. But Nick, if one of our listeners wants to reach out and pick your brain a little bit, what's your email address, and then also what's the website for the Globetrottin ADs podcast so they can start listening?
Well, it's Globetrottin ADs. There's no N, not Globetrotting, Globetrottin ADs.com. And that link to the podcast is there, the conferences, some of the other cool things that we're doing. And you can email me at globetrottinads@gmail.com. Twitter is also great at Nick_GTADS, Globetrottin ADs.
Right. Very active on Twitter. For listeners, we're with Nick DeForest, Certified Master Athletic Administrator, founder and host of the Globetrottin ADs podcast. We're going to be back in just a minute for some more wisdom, but let's take another quick break and hear from another sponsor. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We also want to thank Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. They are on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. They provide a variety of interactive touchscreen video consoles, along with an extensive library of templates to make it easier than ever to recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present. For ideas on how to showcase your school's diverse history, along with your proudest moments, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Or to learn more and get started with your own digital Wall of Fame tribute, call them at 614-981-3589, or you can email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. That's sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. We're back with Nick DeForest, Certified Master Athletic Administrator and Director of Athletics at the American International School in Vienna, Austria. Nick, one of the things we like to do with the podcast is this idea of sharing best practices. So, you've got a unique perspective, growing up, in Canada, playing, collegiately, in the States, but now the last 20 plus years, working in an international setting. So, what are some best practices that you have seen, maybe even initiatives that you started at your school that you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think one of the best practices that I really believe we do well, I think is unique to international schools as well. So a bit different. And that's our coaches and teachers really, really work well together in encouraging kids to play sports and to try new sports. So we don't have year-long sports. It's mostly 3 seasons. And there's not so many clubs in all these countries that kids can join if they're just moving in 2 years, moving out. So the promoting multi-sport, participation is really important for us to get amount of players on our teams. But I think the coaches, the teachers, the admin at our school especially work really well and encouraging kids to get out and play sports and try something new. And there's just no competitiveness about, well, you shouldn't run track because you're a basketball player, or, you need to do preseason basketball instead of play soccer or something like that. The coaches really encourage everyone to try new and work together. And I think that sends a message to the students that, it's sports movement participation is really important, for life. Most of our kids aren't going to go and play college. They're not trying to go play college, but we hope that they, continue to play sports in some form or fashion for their whole life. So I think that unified message to students is something we do really well at our school. I hope others do. And I think that's a bit different than a lot of situations in the United States. Yeah. And of course, one big difference I would say of international schools to schools in the US is that international travel. You touched on it a little bit before, but to fly to Moscow, we have to get each kid individual visas, and that's tons of paperwork, going to an office. It's bad. It's often really bad.
I'm going to hope that, there's someone in the school system, not you, that handles that sort of thing, the visas and the paperwork. Is that a safe assumption?
Not really. I do a lot of it. Just because it's so detailed. We have 5 people in our office, so I'd say that. But you have to get so many things from the parents, to make sure they get everything in time. So I do a lot of it myself for sure. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to follow up with another one of our regular questions. 100 years ago, I'm a little bit older than you. When I was in high school, it was very common for, my coaches to say something along the lines of, come on, Jake, you got to be tough, or come on, Jake, you got to suck it up. And, now it's, I think have learned better ways to communicate that, but toughness is such an important part of the athletic experience. How do you, as a leader, how do you coach kids to be tough while also being aware of and sensitive to the very real social emotional challenges that a Generation Z kid is experiencing? Do you have any advice for us?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think my approach with kids, as the question is, but it's the same with adults and same with our coaches and colleagues. And I think it's to really be open and honest with those kids that you're coaching. You show them that you value their opinion. You show them that you really care and that you're there for them, and then building that relationship. Then I think, when you do that and they know that you care about them, they're going to work harder for you. They're going to trust you that you're leading them down the right path on the field, but then they'll probably also trust you with things that maybe aren't going right off the field. And I think that's by being open and honest with the kids yourself, that breeds that with them as well. And then you can push them, if they believe in you, they'll go to bat for you as well, so to speak. Yeah.
It's that old cliche, and it's a cliche because it's true. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Okay.
Yeah.
Great
It
stuff.
It is.
Well, Nick, this has been pretty cool catching up with you and getting a little more history of the podcast, but we're not done yet. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to ask you to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job, but we're only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. And the athletic director toolbox segment sponsored by Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. We're going to hear a quick message from them, and then we're going to come back and find out what's going to go in Nick DeForest's athletic director toolbox. Please stay with us. As I mentioned, the athletic director's toolbox segment is sponsored by Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic program. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack also gives you access to the 95% of the parents and the players who really love your program, and it gives them a voice to help demonstrate the importance that a positive athletic experience has for them. Go to athleticsurveys.com and check out their testimonials, and then give them a call at 1-800-738-6466, or you can email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. If you've never used a survey to take the pulse of your parents or your student athletes, you're really missing out on some important information. Talk to the pros at Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack and let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. Well, we've come to that point of the podcast where we ask our guests to contribute to the athletic director's toolbox. So Nick DeForest, American International School in Vienna, challenging you to send out a brand new AD, but you only get to put 3 things in their toolbox. What 3 items are going into your athletic director toolbox?
All right. Well, I'm going to start with they definitely have to take all of these tips in this book to heart for sure, and read that. So we'll stick with all. And the first is going to be ask, and that's ask for help. Ask for help from colleagues, from coaches, from students, from parents. Where you need it, just ask, and ask for their opinion as well, right? So that's going to be followed by listen. Okay, listen to your coaches, listen to your student athletes and colleagues around you, especially if it's a new school to you, not just a new job, but a new school. Listen to what they think about the program. Get to know everything about it. And the second L in all is for learn. Just because you have the job, of course, doesn't mean that you know everything. If you're not involved with the NIAAA yet, take a course, read some books, listen to other podcasts, maybe mine. But yeah, keep learning. Yeah. So ask, listen, and learn.
Wow. Well, I appreciate the shout out. And again, for all the listeners, Nick's ideas are going to be going into the 2nd edition of the book, which should be coming out summer of 2022. And the listen one, I love when ADs suggest that. And it's one that I suggest, but it's one that took me way too long to learn in my career. Great stuff. Nick, one more time, if one of our listeners wants to reach out and pick your brain a little bit, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think go to the website, globetrottinads.com. Emails on there, the socials are on there, the podcast links are on there. And we'd love to hear from people. And Jake, I love listening to your podcast and learning about ADs all around the US and continue to do it. So keep up the good work.
Oh, well, thanks again. Consider that high praise. Nick DeForest, American International School of Vienna, and founder and host of the Globetrottin ADs podcast. Thanks so much for being on today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
For our listeners, remember the Zoom recordings of all these interviews are uploaded to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We appreciate you listening today. Come back again next time for another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. And we also want to thank our good friends at Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. You can learn more about what Hometown Ticketing can do for you and your athletic department by going to hometownticketing.com. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing.